well, welcome to 2024. My name is Joe McNamara, part of the AML Right Source marketing team, Director of Solutions. And joining me today are probably two of the more familiar faces, if not voices, that for our subscribers have definitely heard throughout the course of 2023 and quite frankly, the last few years. And that's John Byrne and Elliot Berman. Thanks, guys, for joining today, and especially for getting ready to answer a couple questions from yours truly, starting, I think, most importantly with John. You tend to do this once a year, especially towards the end of the fiscal year, or I guess the calendar year, just regarding some of the trends and things that we've seen in the financial crime compliance space over the course of the year, and then obviously looking forward. And for those of you that are interested, John, you just released yours, or we're getting ready to post that. In the month of January here that we're recording. But I did want to bring up, a couple questions that kind of came out of that. I think the biggest one being, from the course of kind of trends and things that we've seen in this space, it's apparent that there's nothing that's overly novel when it comes to kind of findings and, whether it's the US based or quite frankly, the global outlook. But, from your perspective in kind of piecing together all of the different areas that you guys covered throughout 2023 and this week in AML, what are some of the things that stood out? And then, Elliot, I'd like to follow up with just more of, what do we anticipate almost continuing to see, or certainly keeping fingers on the pulse when it comes to, moving into 2024?
Well, Joe, this year, we have posted it, by the way, the blog. This year, we took a look back. But in previous years, I've actually done what you see in major newspapers like USA Today, the in and out list. What's in for 2024, what's out for 2023. But to your point, a lot of what was in 2023 is going to stay. So there's not a lot of thematic changes. There's going to be continued focus on crypto regulation, on domestic and foreign terrorism. Sadly, with the actions going on in the Middle East and in Russia, with sanctions, that becomes an issue. Corruption is a global problem and continues to be an issue that AML professionals have to pay attention to. We are just in the midst of going back to the Middle East and other issues, dealing with how humanitarian groups struggle with getting financial access, because some charities have been fronts for terrorist activity. So how do you manage that? So that continues to be a topic of concern and focus. Fraud, massive fraud everywhere. I mean, we've been dealing the past couple of years with the remnants of pandemic fraud, but we have elder abuse. We certainly have unemployment fraud in the U.S. and certainly some similarities overseas. But all of these topics continue to challenge our community. So I don't see, as you say, I don't see changes in the areas, but obviously under each of those areas, hopefully some progress and some additional tools, whether they're tech tools or legislative tools, that will help professionals and institutions deal with those ongoing problems.
Well, and that seems to track, right, John? And I know that we've all kind of been tracking, all the different publications that are coming out. I know, Elliot, before we started recording, we were actually kind of talking about some of the things coming out from Wolfsburg and others, in the Asia Pacific, realm as well. But from your perspective, Elliot, and kind of thinking about some of the major topics that you guys covered on TWIA in 2023, what stands out most to you in terms of either continuing the conversation, to John's point, and continuing to kind of follow the progression or advancement in certain areas, or, quite frankly, something that may have gotten some attention, but is certainly primed to kind of, I don't want to say explode, but certainly grow in 2024?
Well, John touched on a few of them, but I'll kind of run through my list here. And so if you look at one big area of continuing concern, is obviously the global political situation, because it does impact, puts pressure on economies, which can create more opportunity for fraud, We've got the terrorist threat. We actually have the open conflict threat. So I think globally we're going to see continued coordinated use of coordinated sanctions as a tool to try to moderate behavior. And as John and I just recently talked about, also export controls. I think we'll see more coordinated use of export controls as well. Secondly, more coordinated effort on just trying to manage and reduce terrorist financing. So again, I think the key theme here is coordination. In terms of kind of on the risk side, I think we all face the risk of instability in that we've got what's going on in the Middle East. We're 2 years into Russia and Ukraine. The Chinese economy, is struggling. Doesn't mean it's going to struggle forever, but they have a huge influence on what happens globally. And then, as John mentioned just a moment ago, when you have instability, it can either be triggered by corruption or certainly provide more opportunity for corruption, political corruption and corruption in the business world. So I think those are all things that will continue and continue to be of concern in 2024. In the regulatory area, as everybody knows, the U.S. Beneficial Ownership Registry went live January 1st of this year, and it's part of a global effort to increase transparency and therefore reduce corruption and money laundering and other financial crimes. So I think we're going to see a continued effort both in the U.S. and globally about transparency. There's also been a continuing effort by the U.S., but also by many other countries to, again, do things as partners. If we're all operating all by ourselves, we're being much less effective. And so the U.S. has signed a number of bilateral agreements in the financial crime prevention space where FinCEN and the FIU of the other country are more information sharing and joint activity. And then I think on more on that bank regulatory level, in addition to we're going to see new regulations, I think, because FinCEN's already, or Treasury has already signaled the fact that we're going to see some kind of a real estate related regulation and possibly some others in 2024. But I think the other thing we're seeing is advanced tech tools, including artificial intelligence, but not only artificial intelligence, being used by the regulators. So in the webinar that we did on our AML Voices series in December was about where is compliance technology going. And one of our panelists talked about the activities that are happening by the central bankers around the world in terms of looking at applying these tools to how they do examinations, how they look at country level or national level risk and things like that. So I think we'll see more of that. And then the technology area, I realize that, AI, it's like, I think I tried to buy a toaster and, I couldn't decide if I wanted the AI toaster or the non-AI toaster. It was a little challenging for me, but I do think these advanced technology tools will continue to make their way into our space in a good way. There'll be some of the, I don't want to say simple, but the more basic stuff, robotic process automation will continue to have an impact, taking the more mundane tasks and automating them. And then large language models, I think we'll start to see those impacting transaction monitoring systems. And as the tools to create or to leverage the large language models get more available and easier to use, we may see organizations and groups of organizations coming up with their own flavor of these technologies. We'll just have to see how that unfolds, but it's early. I don't think, by the way, these advanced technologies means that all of a sudden we're just going to put the whole system on autopilot, and we can all go to the bar and come back and see what it does. I don't think that's how it's going to work.
Probably not the best thing to send to your regulator either.
No, right. Yeah. What did we do? Well, we increased consumption of alcohol, but we decreased the number of people who are consuming it. Yeah, I don't think that would be helpful. No, but again, there's always concern that additional automation means reduction in jobs. But in our space, at least to this point, and I think for the foreseeable future, and I'm by no means an expert, no one is saying they've figured out how to automate human judgment. And, in the US, for example, is this suspicious and should I file a SAR? That's a judgment issue. That's not just a data issue. I think that we're just going to see more of the things that make sense to automate be automated, so that the people can do the stuff that is uniquely done by people.
Right. So, I mean, to kind of summarize and certainly kind of keep on the radar, I'm hearing corruption, crypto, tech, and just overall growth, right? And back to John, your initial comments, as we kind of look around the space and, whether it's from any of those lenses, I think, what we're going to continue to see is organizations find better ways to collaborate and find better ways to tackle some of the most profound challenges that this industry and sector continues to face on a day-to-day basis. And so, before kind of hanging it up here, I just wanted to give you the last word in terms of, what folks can come to expect from This Week in AML, AML Voices, AML Conversations, and just about anything else that either you or Elliot or a joint team are creating here at AML RightSource. What would you say just to kind of keep an eye on in 2024?
Well, what I would say is we pay attention to a variety of reports done by government or the private sector. Wanted to just flag the TRM Labs, everything a lot of folks know, Ari Redbourn, and we've been able to interview him before. They've just done a report that got released as we're recording this, and that's that they found a link between stronger regulation and reduced illicit activity in the crypto space. So they should take a look at that. There's also a report from the Human Security Collective on the issue of de-risking that we've mentioned. So those things become important. But I just want to go back to the notion that we're becoming high-tech overnight. No, we're not. But clearly, one of the things that is really impressive is the focus on innovation that in the U.S. Treasury has emphasized, the U.S. Congress actually emphasized in the AMLA law from a couple of years ago, and certainly we've seen that with the FATF. So the focus on that becomes important. I would just say to our listeners out there, I've been recently approached by a group run by the Secret Service that's working on a project. This is very U.S. specific, but you'll appreciate the theme, and that is looking at what we know as 314A, which is when the government provides information to institutions for them to see if they have those accounts. And they're trying to figure out a more efficient way, whether it's tech enabled or whether it's process enabled, so that when those institutions get those requests to look up the information, they can do it quickly and efficiently. And we're going to connect them to a lot of our clients to talk to these project leaders. That's just one example of making what I call the AML infrastructure more efficient, both from a cost standpoint, but also at the end of the day, Elliot and I have been doing this a really long time. Why do we do all of this? It's to get information as quickly as relevant information in the hands of law enforcement so they can process, investigate, prosecute, deter. That's what this is all about. It's not about checking the box for our regulators, even though that's their obligation sometimes to do that. So I think we're now at a place, Joe, in 2024 where we weren't in 2020, for example, that there seems to be a consensus. Let's be more efficient. How do we do that? If there's a resource change, how do we make sure that people still have their careers? And I think, as Elliot said, you're going to need human intervention in a lot of this. But I think innovation, tech, process changes, and all of us collaborating is something I look forward to seeing further accessed, if you will, throughout 2024. So we'll be talking about that as these various reports and these various policy changes are proposed.
Well, fantastic, guys. And to our audience out there, just another reminder, you can find every episode that Elliot and John have produced. I think we just surpassed 185, 186 of the This Week in AML series. You can find that on amlrightsource.com within the Resource Center. There's an extensive library of all the different topics that have been covered either in our webinar series or, to John's earlier point, his AML Conversations podcast, where he gets to sit down with folks on both the public and private sector and talk about, not only theoretical or systemic issues, but quite frankly, practical ones and figuring out, how to provide the best value to, our audience. And so I would encourage you guys to continue to search through the library. At the same time, if you're looking for something and you can't find it, shoot us a note. We'd love to entertain the idea of potentially, taking on some more suggestions in terms of topics to cover and things like that. But I think I speak for all of us when I say collectively we're excited to take a look and certainly see how 2024 unfolds, and we will continue to monitor and report on it closely. Thanks, everybody, and stay tuned.
Thanks, Joe.